Peace. I'm just looking to see. I think I'm good. Where were we yesterday? On the black hand side, Black Power Networks and Institutions of Higher Learning. Again, the title for the reading today. On the black hand side, Black Power Networks and Institutions of Higher Learning. We have sketched an outline of how the white male dominated ruling class in America seeks to bend the public policy formation process to its will. We have looked briefly at the policy planning and policy formation network of corporate interests, research and educational institutions, policy planning groups, opinion shaping apparati, and the governmental lawmaking regulation and executive institutions it utilizes to actualize its class interest. It is tempting to perceive the foregoing discussion as primarily a description of how the predominant class of the class society seeks to work its wiles on the subordinate classes without regard for their racial composition. Therefore, there are those who think that a class analysis instead of a race analysis would be appropriate here. They may argue that racism is only instrumental to ruling class interests. This proposition implies that the common enemy of both the black and white masses is their domination by the ruling class, whose processes of ruling we have described so far. The ruling elite of America is practically lily white, almost exclusively led by white males. Black Americans are excluded from this club and are in no way influentially a part of its special interest process or its policy planning, policy formation processes or network. Even if it's policy planning or policy formation process, pardon me, even if Black Americans were significantly a part of these power systems, they would be Black only in skin color, i.e., honorary whites, assimilated Blacks working in the interest of continuing white domination and supremacy. This is the standing price of their administration, pardon me. This is the standing price of their admission to the club of the ruling corporate elite. As to the masses, including blacks and whites of all classes, we agree with W.E.B. Du Bois, 1968, who described them as not split along horizontal lines, i.e., an integrated division of blacks and whites along middle class, working class, lower class lines that is split along a vertical fissure, Fissure. I'm gonna have to find out what that word means. I like how that sounds. A complete separation of classes by race, cutting across economic layers. He goes on to argue even if one side of this color line, the dark masses were overwhelmingly workers, that an embryonic capitalist class, nevertheless, the split between white and black workers was greater than that between white workers and capitalists. And this split depended not simply on economic exploitation, but on racial folklore grounded on centuries of instinct, habit, and thought implemented by the conditioned reflex of visible color. The verticality of the split between blacks and whites from the ruling elite, if there were an equivalent black class, down through to the very lowest of classes implies that, in reality, we are dealing with an exclusively white nation state which excludes blacks at all of its class levels. This connotes that despite the exploitation of the subordinate classes of both ethnic groups by the ruling white elite, the white lower classes are joined in racial solidarity with the white elite class against the realization of the true and full citizenship of blacks in the United States. Even the nominal citizenship of blacks in this white nation means a sacrifice of black power. Since full membership in that nation would require blacks to no longer see themselves as black, that they shed their identity and consciousness of themselves as a people with cultural and other interests separate from those of whites. This means that black power can only be realized and exercised in the interest of African people at home and abroad if it is consciously based on an African-centered identity and consciousness, and is motivated and guided by a conscious intent of African peoples to gain power equal to or less, pardon me, equal to or in excess of that held by European peoples. If Black power is our goal, we must develop and use an intimate and expert knowledge of the nature and organization of white power and of the white American nation. We should study its class interest structures, its policy formation and execution networks, and its governmental structures and operations in terms of how they may be counterbalanced by equivalent African American based political economic structures, policy formation, execution networks, governing structures, and operations. This implies the development of a black nation within a nation which would fund, organize, and operate its own power networks in order to penetrate, favorably influence, or counter those of the white elite. The need for the full economic development of the African American community, the need for its material enrichment and heavy penetration of the now white American economic system should be by now quite clear. For it is clear that, given the current design and functional operation of the white American nation, its governmental operations and outcomes can only be influenced in favor of Black Americans through solid, appropriately structured social and political organization and the purposeful creation and use of wealth by the Black community. Black institutions chartered with, pardon me, Black institutions chartered by the white elite, funded and influenced in their composition and direction by that elite, for those very reasons, cannot operate freely and fully in the interest of the African American community and in the interest of the worldwide African community. There is a severe need for the African American and Pan African communities to develop African funded special interest and policy formation institutions, as well as several world class universities and research institutions. We must reorganize that the major function of education involves securing the survival of a people, advancing their interests, enhancing their quality of life. Let me repeat that, because this is the true goal of education. We must recognize that the major function of education involves securing the survival of the people, advancing their interests, enhancing their quality of life. Educational establishments are as much a part of the defense establishment of a people as their army. A people bereft of educational institutions dedicated and designed to defend their interests and to solve their problems are essentially a defenseless people, a people vulnerable to the exploitation of other peoples as well as vulnerable to annihilation. We cannot advance or appropriately defend our interests and lives as an African people if we place the fate of our community in the hands of the educational establishments of our oppressors and enemies, and in the hands of those Africans educated in them. African peoples and African leaders should be recipients of an African centered education. No African should be granted leadership in the African community who has not been certified through education or experience as African centered in consciousness. Ooh, talk that shit. Let me repeat that. No African should be granted leadership in the African community who has not been certified through education or experience as African centered in consciousness, identity, and orientation. In the absence of such institutions today, it is incumbent on the so-called predominantly Black colleges and universities and the Black and African studies programs in these and predominantly white institutions to develop teaching, training, and research departments in all areas vital to African communal interests. Intense education and research must not only occur in the areas of history, culture, political science, and victimology, toting all the ailments of Black suffering followed by white establishment dictated or defined recommendations. Every department in predominantly Black colleges and universities should require all their students to attend courses taught from an African centered perspective and designed to achieve African centered ends. This includes business, economics, the social and physical sciences. For example, Black students should not only be taught business administration courses, which only prepare them for work and servitude in the white owned businesses. They should also be taught the development and administration of Black owned businesses, how to develop and execute business and economic strategies in the interest of Black communities' control of its own markets, to run specific types of businesses, to finance businesses from within the Black community, to solve business and economic problems facing the Black community, to penetrate the white business world as entrepreneurs, to gain control of white markets and businesses, to engage in import export businesses, to compete as international business persons heading multinational Black owned corporations and the like. In the physical sciences, Black students should be instructed in the politics of science, the sociology of science, i.e., what social, political, economic, cultural formations are conducive to the creation and continuing development of science and technology, What are the scientific and technological issues and needs in African communities? How trained African scientists and technicians can profitably work in the interests of African peoples, etc. Black universities and think tanks must increase their African centered research, their consultancy relations with the Black community, and fully engage themselves with Black community development at all levels and in all areas. For all African American controlled institutions must come to the realization that their primary reason for being is the protection and betterment of African peoples. They must recognize their place and the role they must play in a vast network of institutions, groups, and individuals designed to achieve these ends. For if African peoples cannot be protected in their quality of life optimized by Black power, then what is the point? And with that, I hope your today is great, and I hope your tomorrow is greater. Peace. Chime in on our community. Eventually, we're probably going to get some blogging going. Not sure if I'm going to put up another website or not. I'm going to just cruise, do what I do, you know. Um, got some more jewelry on the way. I just love this book, The True Black People's Bible. You feel me? And this is no diss to any of you that follow the Bible or use the Bible or appreciate and use it. This ain't no offense to you. To me, this was specifically designed by our best, our best, designed this specifically for us. So with that, again, peace. I hope your today is great and may your tomorrow be greater.